Hey everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz,
I'm Justin Allen.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
and we are coming to you 2 days after the election in the United States. I don't know how much comic book talk we're going to get in there, but we will talk about some stuff later on. But it seems that the events that have transpired over the past 48 hours at this point, at the time we're recording this, have blown some people's minds. And like the Orlando episode, we felt this is something that we should address. Now, to give a little bit of background, I live in a blue state, and these other gentlemen live in what turned out to be red states.
Pennsylvania has voted blue for decades for president. And
Yeah, I think the last time was 84
Yeah.
with Reagan. I think it even went, I believe it went blue for Dukakis, actually, because of the heavy voting for Bush.
Right.
Yeah. I don't want to put hands of Bible on that, but I do believe that's the case.
I know it's been blue every year I've been, and I don't know.
So, Bryan, I'm going to start with you because I know that you were active in some canvassing earlier on in the week and a tail part of last week. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been out canvassing now 2 or 3 times this election. Most recently on Tuesday, I actually took the whole day off. Went out intending to do 2 shifts. So basically, they block you off into 3-hour shifts, and I brought my partner Pat with me for the first shift, and they kind of doubled up on us, not because we had 2 people, but because I guess overall they were just they give you like a pack of addresses on sheets of paper in a certain area, and so they were like, all right, well, this is pretty light. Can you take another one? I said, sure, why not? No big deal. But yeah, I ended up being out from like 11 to 4 something in the afternoon. So walking around, going to known Democratic addresses where people either had lived or currently lived, and just all we were doing is saying, hey, today's election day. We just want to remind you to vote. Do you need a ride? Do you need any information about where to go? Like just basic, nothing hard, nothing even necessarily partisan, except that we were only going to Democrats. Mm-hmm. But what I was shocked by early on, and this was the first time I had seen this, because whereas previously I had canvassed in sort of the projects, which was an interesting experience unto itself several weeks ago, this time I was canvassing in an area that was very affluent and sort of like a nice, like upscale, newly built kind of closed-in community. And several, and I mean like I lost count, but it was probably in the less than 10. Several of these places no longer had Democrats possibly either living there or supporting Hillary, and in fact had Trump stuff in their yard or up in their window. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know what the official guidance is on those situations, but I just kind of kept on going. It was kind of like right. The Passover. I was like, I'm not in that household. But it was no one was outright rude. Like, so we only talked to a handful of people because most people during the day on a weekday, they're working, they're doing other things or whatever. Mm-hmm. No one was rude. No one was, nasty. Basically, if I did talk to anyone, it was, oh yeah, I voted, or oh yeah, I'm getting ready to vote. But only a few people I noticed were really like, yeah, oh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. I voted for Hillary, da-da-da-da-da, which I don't know in general if that's common, but I certainly would have hoped, the people who would have been excited would have been a little more like, positive on it. And a lot of people were just kind of like, oh no, yeah, I already voted. Okay, bye. So, who knows? But I already had kind of a weird feeling early in the day.
Yeah.
In Florida, an area that I absolutely believed would not go blue. It has gone blue in the past, but I know Florida well enough, and I've been here all my life, that I think our voters are largely idiots. And there is certainly a thing to Florida man, and Florida having all these ridiculous stories of corrupt politicians and just corrupt politics and all this stuff. But, in general, I was really kind of dark on Florida. But I thought, of course, as I have followed 538, the website that does the polling model, Nate Silver, I thought, oh, well, Florida could go. North Carolina could go. That'd be fine. But that blue firewall up north, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. That's rock solid, and we're going to be fine. No worries.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Florida is a bunch of idiots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't met too many of us Pennsylvania idiots, then, have you? Because we really screw things up.
Well, yeah, but when we were talking over the weekend, you had mentioned, Justin, that you had gone through coal country. And,
yeah.
So why don't you tell a little bit about what the Pennsylvania experience is like?
I'll be honest. You've got when you talk about Pennsylvania voting, there are 5 points of blue in the state. You've got Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Erie, Pittsburgh, Philly, and then Center County, State College, Penn State area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got these 5 little points, 5 dots. The rest of the state is very conservative. So you're talking percentage area-wise, it's mostly a conservative state. However, population-wise, Philly and Pittsburgh usually will carry the rest of the state on the backs. So that's where a lot of voters, both Democrat and Republican, have gotten mad, is because they think that no matter what Philly wants, or if Philly wants something, that's what the whole state's going to get. Like we carry a 25% or 25-cent gas tax just for Philly people in Philly to receive reduced bus fare. The whole state pays for that. So a lot of our Democrats and Republicans were not voting for Democrats this year, or were not voting for Hillary Clinton because they were tired of the same old. I mean, it astounds me that a gay person would vote for Trump, or especially with Pence on the ticket. Yet, you get these wonderful socially liberal, fiscally conservative gay men here, and that's what they voted for. They voted for Trump because of that. In the coal country where I was driving through, it was just amazing to see the amount of Trump signs on every lawn for, miles. All you do is see Trump and Pence. Mm-hmm. And it was just it was just kind of bizarre. I mean, I like to think that, maybe we didn't see him because, us good Democrats like to, be a little bit more eco-friendly and not put up that many signs. But, it's, as we're driving through, it's just kind of scary. It really was that there's that many people that hated or have hated the past 8 years so much that they were willing to, overlook the characteristics of the man that they voted for. I mean, as president, he should be the best of the best. He should be someone that everybody could look up to. He should be somebody that I would want, I would want to look up to. And I can't see how this man, I have a teacher who I know for a fact would have given him detention, any one of her students detention, if they would have talked to her the way he does. But for some reason, it's okay with him. And I feel bad. I feel bad that these people are that hurt, or they feel that hurt.
Yeah, I think for me, and again, I do live in somewhat of a liberal bubble, being so close to Princeton University. Mm-hmm. But even with that being said, you go over to neighboring towns like Helmetta, or some of the more rural areas of Cranberry, and especially farmland. There wasn't a single farm that you passed in my general area, apart from the one that I go to, that didn't have some kind of Trump signs, and some of the really offensive ones like the Hillary for prison and that.
Oh, that was huge, and thankfully in my area we didn't see those.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. When you mention about gay men, I do not have a problem with a gay man that has internalized, that they're wired towards a fiscal conservative perspective.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that.
No.
I can't process the social aspect, why you would vote against your own interests, but the thing that really bothers me about the Because I think, what was the percentage? 14%
Mm-hmm.
of gay people voted
Yeah.
for Trump. The thing that really bothers me is the vilification of liberals
Yep.
by those individuals. Because if it wasn't for liberals, you would not have the right to marry, and you
Oh,
would
absolutely.
not have certain protections regarding places that you can rent or buy.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's so much there that every gay person has because of liberal outreach, and not just gay people within
Right.
that bubble. These strides would not have happened if not for our straight allies.
Mm-hmm.
And that pisses me off like you wouldn't believe.
I'm also really upset, and we've talked a little bit about faith in the past, but as a Christian, I am upset with my fellow Christians who
Oh
are
my
more on
God.
the conservative sides for absolutely overlooking all of the very on-the-nose, outspoken hatred, abusiveness, gluttony, avarice. Like, people used to, my mom, so I actually had a conversation with my mom tonight about some of this, and she's a one issue voter. It doesn't matter. If it could be, literally, I think it could be Hitler, and if they were pro-life, they'd get her vote. And she used to absolutely go after Bill Clinton as an evil person because of what he did with Monica and what he did and all that stuff. She didn't like Hillary because Hillary stayed with him. But she absolutely thought that was just proof right there that he was and I'm sitting there now tonight talking to her about Trump's been he's on his third marriage. He's publicly bragged about cheating on at least one, if not both of them.
Mm-hmm.
All the other stuff. And yet you're sitting there saying that, so her excuse was like, Kennedy was a womanizer and nobody knew it at the time. But that shows you that, there can be an okay president and I'm just like, how far have you gone into this bizarro world that you can justify and rationalize all of these very anti-Christian behaviors just to fit your political agenda?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just baffling to me. And that of all things, like you were saying, it disgusts me because I'm not a perfect person in the slightest, but I would never go after a Bill Clinton or whoever for just their whatever. And somehow feel like that would rationalize, my belief that they're a bad person or whatever. Like I'm not throwing stones in glass houses. You know what I mean? Trump, on the other hand, though, the fact that these people are so hypocritical and they hold this guy up as this, he's going to set things right. He's going to, they look at him like a lot of us looked at Obama in 2008 or 2007. No, 2008. And just they're night and day. And Obama proved this when he did his little speech at the Rose Garden just the other day on Wednesday. That was probably one of the most wise and reflective and just generous and just what you want a president to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that is 180 degrees from what Trump has proven himself to be like, at least during the campaign and in his life thus far. I do, however, take some small solace in the fact that there is already signs that Trump is quickly pivoting after the election, surprisingly.
Oh,
yeah.
Which, to me, the best thing that can happen in all this is he comes out as absolutely not as crazy as he played himself to be to win the vote, and actually gets in there, doesn't build the wall, does some Republican type things like you'd expect, but doesn't go after LGBT people, doesn't do all this crazy stuff that people are worried about. And then his base, he is intolerant, ignorant, radical base, not the majority of the voters to be sure, but that crazy people, the KKK, all the really awful, the basket of deplorables, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they are left absolutely devastated by the fact that this guy turned out not to be the person they thought he was, and that would be the most just outcome of the next 4 years.
Right.
Did you see he's already pulled his pro-life being a pro-life stance off his website?
Yeah, and he's also pulled.
I didn't know he pulled that.
And but the big thing that was reported today was most of the immigration stuff was pulled.
Yep.
I do think he is manifestly unfit to hold the office.
Absolutely.
But I do have solace, like you said, Brian, that I do think that there is this element there of he said what he needed to say to get elected, and whether through design, which I don't think he's that smart, but I think his trip to Mexico said everything. He didn't mention the principal part of his platform that actually got him to Mexico. And I think you're going to see a lot of that, however long his presidency lasts, because I don't think it's inconceivable that he is impeached through either these court actions or by pissing the Republicans off where they use one of the court actions to provide the basis for impeachment. Hooray, then we get President Pence.
And that's scary.
That's scary, but at the same token, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but from a domestic standpoint, I'm more comfortable with the President Trump. From an international standpoint, I'm more comfortable with the President Pence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. But
yeah. Which is like that's a horrible, horrible trade-off.
Yeah.
I do think that this has awoken a sleeping giant. You can't tell me that all of those protesters were people who voted. There were some lazy-ass people there, and the numbers bear that out.
Yep.
The most encouraging graphic I saw, and I don't know if anyone else saw this, that if you just restricted the vote to people between 18 and 25, we would have had 44 blue states, 2 tied.
Yep.
And the 16-year-old trans kid and the 17-year-old Asian who is going to be voting in 2018, they're going to be ripe for coming over to whatever mechanism is in place.
Yep.
I think
a Trump victory in this case is winning the battle but losing the war.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just hope the war doesn't devastate us too much in the 2 to 4 years where it matters.
The one thing I kept thinking Tuesday as things were going downhill is I said, look, we survived Nixon, we survived Reagan, we survived George W., we'll survive Trump. I hope that is not understating it, because obviously I'm on the same page. He's a little bit of a nutbag, like he's just absolutely insane. But again, so is Nixon. Reagan and Bush maybe a little less so, but Nixon absolutely, and we survived him. So I'm pretty confident we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But we have to stick together, and we have to do a better job of organizing, of volunteering, and of being advocates for each other, because that's so much of the apathy. Some people can blame the candidacy of Hillary versus the Bernie people and all that. But I honestly, at the end of the day, think a blind sort of naivete of some voters that they had to vote for that they should not vote for the lesser of two evils, that they were somehow taking this principled stand to vote for third party or to not vote because they were so disgusted with what they perceived was this, Democratic Party shenanigans. At the end of the day, right here we have proof that technique, that strategy absolutely does not benefit society.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks, and I want there to be third and fourth parties that are viable. I don't like a two-party system. But when you have a majority two-party system, you got to vote for the lesser of two evils.
Mm-hmm.
You have to.
And we've never had a perfect candidate, ever.
Of course not.
Ever. Yeah. Ever. I don't understand. That was the one thing that really drove me nuts with the Bernie Bros, was this image of perfection, and you're just not there.
Nope.
The one thing I will say for Bernie, as anti-Bernie as I was, he was a tremendous surrogate for Hillary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you think of what he did and Elizabeth Warren and the Obamas, I think looking back, the perfect candidate at this point would have been Biden.
I agree completely.
Because Biden is able to talk to blue-collar people in a way that none of the people I mentioned can.
I agree completely with that.
I had RSVP'd over to the event at the Javits Center on election night, and was just not feeling it. And some of it is like there's so many roads closed, and it's kind of cockamamie way the way you get to the Javits through a subway. If you've ever been to New York Comic Con, you understand that. And, I just wasn't feeling it, and I haven't talked to my friend Bill Stewart, and I haven't talked to some other people who I know went, and I have a hell of a story related to that. But I mean, I can't imagine what that vibe must have been like when those
Oh,
returns were coming in.
seriously.
I mean, my God.
Ugh.
But yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
our friend Carl Frisch, he actually did go,
Yeah.
and I have not talked to him about it yet either, because I'm obviously waiting a little bit for the dust to settle. But I'm sure he's got some stories too about just the mood. And the only thing I did hear is when Podesta finally came out at like 2 a.m. and told people pretty much, hey, look, go home, it's late, we're not going to know anything, for a little while. There were still some good crowd audio, like people were cheering, and like, so enough people stuck around and tried to make a thing of it, but oof,
Yeah.
that just sounded awful.
Now, to my story, which was my big moment of agita with social media, was that I have a friend, Jeff, who is only 2 years older than me, and he has a 22-year-old daughter, which is um, sobering. And she had worked for the Hillary campaign, mostly in the Philadelphia office, and was there. And she sent a text, a very cryptic Facebook post at 5 in the morning, and then nothing was heard from her. And Jeff did not get in touch with her until about 1 p.m. or so the next day. Very worried. The post she had, she was walking up the West Side Highway. It's a completely unfamiliar area, really very close to the waterfront. And seeing that and knowing his worry, coupled with the some of these really desperate posts you were seeing, that a number of people started posting the National Suicide Hotline number.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to call him out because he's an asshole. So if you're on comic boards and you see this guy, he's an Islamophobe to a ridiculous extent that I've found out since. He's not a person that I think most people who would like me would like. I think that's a diplomatic way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
And he mocked me on his Facebook page and saying this is why Trump won. And the lack of empathy is what really, really stood. I don't understand the cruelty that you can adopt in a situation like that. I'll never understand that. I mean, what skin is it off your teeth if somebody's posting a phone number for that? Why do you have to comment on something like that? There's times you take the high ground and you shut up, even if you disagree. I mean, there are people here that you could see. I mean, what are they saying? There's been like 2 trans teenagers who have committed suicide since this
Yeah,
happened.
I've heard of at least one.
Yeah, so that serves a purpose. What I did, I mean, I almost cry, and especially that it was so personalized,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
connected to somebody who has a connection to me. I mean, I've met his daughter maybe 4 times in my life, but
What bothers me and kills me about
man.
all of this, and this is predating Trump, there is such a toxic culture of individuals on the internet who absolutely take such personal pleasure in the agony and the despair and in mocking others. And it's so textbook bully that
Mhm.
I sit there and go, and I meet these people. So my fraternity that I'm involved in has had a string of these kind of situations over the years. And I know some of these guys. And when person, they absolutely aren't brave enough to do this.
Yes.
But online, oh my God,
Yeah.
they unleash. And I only can suppose that they had such awful childhoods with bullies that they learned that behavior there, and that because they never quite got to a position in their social circles where they could do that in person, but with the internet, anybody can just be a smartass and an asshole.
Oh.
That now this is their great joy in life, and you see the alt-right rife with this.
And there's so many contradictions with that. Don't you fucking people know that Breitbart was a Jew? I mean, talking about not knowing your oh my God. But Brian,
Yeah.
I think you hit on something, just as a good percentage of people who queer bash are coming to terms in a sense with their own sexuality through that violent act. I do think that the worst cyberbullies were people who were bullied when they were younger. I
which,
absolutely believe that.
which is just so devastating for everybody, because not only do you have this force of evil that spreads this way, but that they themselves are victims and just haven't been able to deal with it. And I just don't, and it's so fundamentally foreign to me and alien to me. Like, I don't fear Islamic people. I don't fear other faiths, other genders, other anything. I don't fear any of that. I fear these people and in the way they manifest, because to me it's so, like, that's what's foreign to me. That's what I identify as the other and the evil. And so many of these people fear foreigners and all this other stuff because they don't get that or whatever. And this isn't to toot my own horn. It's just to say it's so bizarre. Every time I see it, it revolts me. Like, there's an instinctive disgust that comes out in me when I see it. And I've started unfollowing and unliking. I've started, short of blocking some of my friends, I've absolutely started unfollowing and deleting stuff off Facebook because I don't want that in my life. I don't care if it's a friend of mine, a family member. I don't want it in my life. And yes, that is a kind of selection that isn't probably the best for, having a diverse view of the world. But I get enough of that in my day job. Like, I have friends and coworkers that I have to deal with in real life, and they're that way. So I get that from them, and family members who are religious and conservative. So quite frankly, I don't need any more of that shit.
No.
And I've told people, I said, look, don't bemoan people for expressing themselves on Facebook, or I actually talked about this today. I said, don't be, whatever about people who are out there in the streets protesting. Let them do what they do. It does not affect your life in one iota. You don't want to see it. You don't want to see it on social media. Unfollow them or unfriend them if you really must. But just don't begrudge them. Don't bitch about them. Let them express themselves. Let them do what they need to do to pass on this. I'm not going to do some of that stuff because I don't want to do what I saw people do when Obama got elected. And I want to learn from those mistakes and those really just moments of inhumanity that I witnessed. I don't want to do that. But I will organize, and I will get out there and volunteer, and I will make a difference in my own way, in a positive way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the position of power that I'm drawing strength from, and trying to really focus any negative energy about Trump and his deplorables towards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a mess. It's totally a mess, and it's not going away.
No, it certainly isn't. And if there's any, yeah.
We used to think that if Hillary got elected, all this would keep going, and it probably would have in a different way. But this is not going away. You can go away from it. You can stop checking Facebook or Twitter, or you can go off social media and just do your life, live your life, and it won't affect you as much. But it's not going away from the news. It's not going away from the radio, TV. It's not going. We are now in a permanent, at least for the next 4 years, of this. Mm-hmm. It may not be to the same fervor. I think it certainly will start to normalize, which is its own scary thing altogether. Mm-hmm. But this is our world. We are in a post-Trump world, and that is a different and scary place. So, I mean, do what you got to do to keep your head straight, to keep your life positive. And if that means disconnecting and going and doing your own thing, then do it. Get out of that space. But don't think that this is just going to go away tomorrow. It's not.
One thing that I'm the first to say that, in the last 4 months especially, that, if you see something that resonates with you on Huffington Post or some other report, you post it.
Mm-hmm.
I've certainly done that. I have found it really hard to engage with people who support Trump. And I know that the majority of those people don't identify as racist, don't identify as xenophobic, and that their support of him was tacit approval of those concepts. What I don't think has happened, and this is the one thing where I have to say both sides is, where does that come from? What is it that is appealing to this guy, or because I really don't. I do think that there are, at least in terms of the standard Republican, they settled for him too. I mean, do you hold some of these beliefs even a little bit? Because we're going to be divided states from here on out unless there is some common ground. And we had seen flashes of it. I think the most beautiful flash of it was the essentially bipartisan, apart from fringe, of getting that goddamn Confederate flag down. And I do think that there's a lot more that unites us, but I don't know if we're going to be able. I don't know if we're going to be able to get back to that core.
It's going to take a generation for this to become less. It's going to take older people from a different era to die and to be wiped away from history in some respects for this to ever change. Mm-hmm. The good news is that's going to happen. I firmly believe, like we're talking about with the millennial voters, we have history on our side. We have the future on our side. Mm-hmm. But the intervening years and the damage that it could do for many different things, it's going to take even longer probably to undo.
Yeah.
If it's even possible to undo in certain things like climate change. Like, there's so much damage that will be done because of this. But
when you hear about, drilling in national parks, I mean, that's just
I read something about they want to get rid of national parks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want to revert it back to the states.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. So they'd be state parks. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of that issue. I don't know that I would ever agree with it, but that seems, I don't know. But I mean, here's the thing. Again, no matter what all this despair and gnashing of teeth is, we got to get people out there, and people have to start giving a shit. Mm-hmm. It's the only way this will ever be fixed, besides waiting for old people to die. Which, I mean, as a slightly older person, I'm kind of inclined to not want to wait. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want until I'm 80-something to finally go, oh, good, at least now Democrats are, more widely voted or whatever. I mean, and I think there is, unfortunately, some real soul-searching, and I've certainly read this a few places, on both parties to go, honestly, our shtick for the last however many years, Democrats are no longer appealing to working class whites. Mm-hmm. Republicans are no longer appealing to all the demographics they need to, and they certainly aren't appealing to like the younger and more ethnically diverse groups. So the big parties aren't doing what they need to do, and the Trump presidency and ascendancy is strictly due to a populist, nationalistic message that crossed a little bit on both sides and really motivated the people who have been so disaffected by the last however many years. So, yeah. Rough times.
I think that's the the best way to say this. Yeah.
Let's talk comics.
Okay, but let's talk comics with a twist. Unless before we end with this, Justin, is there anything else you wanted to get in? Because it sounded like you were about to interject there, and I didn't.
Well, I'll be honest. President Obama, you hear people talk about like holding their nose while they push the button or pull back. That was kind of how I was the first time with him. I've come to respect him a lot over especially the last 4 years. The man has been as presidential as you could possibly imagine, and it's such a bitter pill to swallow to see somebody who is so respectful of everybody giving the office to somebody who only respects money. Mm-hmm. And that, that's kind of disheartening for me to see that kind of, the way that's going to change how, our presidency was something that is, we should, something that should be, people should respect the office of, and I firmly believe that we should respect who's ever in the office. I mean,
I disagree with that. I think you should respect the office, but I will never respect that man.
Right. Well, ever. And that's where I I can't do that with this man. I mean,
Yeah.
He is going to get as much as respect as his supporters have given President Obama over the past 8 years, as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, he wants my respect. He's going to have to earn it, and that to me is sad.
Growing
I
up
just
in the New York area, I've been living with goddamn Donald Trump for most of my fucking life. And I really do think he is the ugly American and the worst of America.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that. I believe that since 1986. I'm going to end this segment, and then I'm going to transition on to comics just by saying a couple of things that I am looking forward to. Thank God we have John Oliver. Thank God we have Samantha Bee. Thank God we have voices like Van Jones.
Stephen Colbert.
Mm-hmm. And
man.
This is somebody who's very much under the radar, Seth Meyers.
Yes.
If you see his closer look videos, man, he nails it. And we have Keith Olbermann back.
Yeah.
Through GQ. But there are voices that the thing with comedy, and I'm gonna take this from our friend Chris Lavoie, who used to be with the Stephanie Miller show, is the reason that right-wing comedians don't work is because when you are a comic, you are punching up, and a right-wing comedian punches down. And that's a turnoff for almost anybody except the most extreme bully. I mean, just think of how goddamn awful the entertainment will be at Trump's inauguration.
Oh, God.
I mean, can you imagine?
Well, so there was a bunch of people signing up for the inauguration parade, and I don't think it was just if Hillary won, but like the LGBT marching band. And I'm just sitting there like, oh, God, I'm so glad I didn't sign up. But I'm guessing it's one of those things where they can, obviously bail out, and I'm sure a lot of them will, if that's even a thing. Anyway, there's going to be some amazing art, music, any era that you've seen a very conservative political leader or movement dominating. That's just created such great comedy, art, movies, music, everything. That is certainly a good silver lining.
Yeah. And I'm also going to say that evil always overplays its hand. And I think that will bear out.
Hear, hear.
We're called the Comic Book Bears Podcast. We appreciate you listening to our little commentary there. But we're going to talk about some comics that have a political bent to them. Bryan, it's such a beautiful transition you have here from what you just said. Is that very often my political psyche is shaped in part by some of the art that affects me. And I think that's the case for most people. And some of that is in the realm of comics. So, Bryan, if you wanted to make a recommendation of a politically oriented comic book that somebody might want to sample, what would be your selection there?
Okay, so we've been singing the praises, or at least I think I have. I think more than just me. I think Steve also, of Mark Russell, specifically on Prez before, and now on the Flintstones for quite a while. His satire in both books, and I found out, because I just finished his God is Disappointed in You book, audiobook read by James Urbaniak from Venture Brothers and other places, basically a satirical retelling of the entire Bible. He's just so funny. He's too funny. It's just so great. So he is part of the Hanna-Barbera DC sort of relaunch or reinventing all these different classic Hanna-Barbera characters. And he's writing the Flintstones. They're up to issue 5. And issue 5 is an election issue. On the front cover it says Bedrock the Vote. Whatever. It's cute. Now, what's glorious about this issue is it's 2 stories interwoven, both sort of dealing with elections and politics and war. And it's about a contemporary election between this one random guy, Mayor so-and-so, and then this giant, like, Claude the Destroyer, who is this, like, total badass barbarian kind of, imposing figure. But it turns out the only reason he is that way is because his father was a barbarian before him who led a campaign against a sort of rival or nearby tribe of people called the Tree People. And the election, that election is intercut with an election at a local like high school where Pebbles and Bam Bam are going to school, and definitely that one mirrors somewhat more of the Trump versus anybody kind of thing, because the main guy running, I'm trying to find his name here, but Ralph, sorry, his campaign slogan is "Vote for me or I'll punch you in the beef," and he basically is the school bully running on a platform of being a bully. And it's running against this like little milquetoast kind of. They make fun of his name somewhere in here, but I can't remember off the top of my head what the joke is. So that's the on the nose stuff. But then in the intercut, you deal with Barney and Fred's backstory of being soldiers in a war led by Claude's father against this tree people, and how the war itself was pitched as sort of one thing to the townsfolk. Like, hey, this will help us do this, and they're really evil, and, you know, kind of a vague sort of a metaphor of, you know, why we hate the Middle East kind of thing, or you know, whatever. Insert your generic bad guy trope in there. And then they actually go out to fight this war, and they realize very quickly that these people aren't, like, villainous. They're not even interested in fighting other than defending themselves. They're strong, but they're bringing like kids and families. Like they realize, Fred and Barney, that they're attacking their homes, that these guys are just defending their homes. And it, in an interesting sort of twist on the mythology, Bam Bam actually is one of the little like infants, or an infant they find in the rubble of all of the devastation that they've caused. And because Barney is actually unable to have a child with Betty, this is now the child that he gets and basically brings home, and he has a child. So it's a really kind of messed up and satirical, but also poignant issue. And that's what I really like about this incarnation of the Flintstones, is it is doing something that I think the cartoon itself did to some extent in the era that it first aired. It had a little bit more of a bite, and then in subsequent years, in generations, it's lost that because it's completely out of context. But this book is really finding a way to bring it back. And what's fascinating is Mark Russell, he's absolutely not a Flintstones fan. When he was asked by Dan DiDio to do this book, he was very kind of like not into it, and in fact basically told Dan DiDio, look, I don't like the Flintstones, they're whatever, they're like a kid's cartoon. And Dan DiDio said, no, that's perfect, because we don't want someone writing this book that's precious about it. We want someone writing this book that will make it interesting and have a unique voice, which they knew he had from Prez. So I can't recommend this book highly enough. It's definitely getting a lot of attention in some of the comic reviewers' worlds, both for the writing by Mark Russell and the art by Fred Pugh. I mean, this is some of his strongest art. Very stylized, but not unrecognizably so. Like Barney looks like Barney, Fred looks like Fred. I mean, they resemble their characters from the cartoon enough, but everything in it is just it's great. It's a perfect pairing of that satirical voice with an art style that complements it. So I highly recommend this issue and the whole series. And what's nice is you don't have to get any of the prior issues. If you go to your store right now and get this issue number 5, it is a one and done. Pick it up, enjoy it. If you like it, go back or go forward, but totally stands on its own.
Okay, we're going to move over to Justin. Justin, what is your pick for a politically oriented comic?
Well, I'm not going to go with a comic book. I'm going to go with a comic strip, especially in this latest incarnation. It's been Berkeley Breathitt's Bloom County. It originally started back in 1982, ran through till 89, has had a couple different spots here and there with Opus and Outland. But recently, and if you had read them back in the 80s, you know that he was always attacking playfully Donald Trump. And even to the point of putting Bill the Cat's brain in Donald Trump's brain in Bill the Cat's body, which was hilarious. But when Trump became an obvious player this year or last year, he revived the series in a format that doesn't make sense for people, or especially for publishers, and that was to release them on Facebook for free. And he has been having an amazing time with it. And he hasn't been afraid to call out the certain Democrat liberal policies and problems that they've had as well. It is more skewed towards the liberal aspect. But when yesterday, when everything kind of went through, he posted this beautiful picture of just 4 different squares of just images, and it says maybe a good time to reboot. And I just kind of, it was almost kind of sobering that, this man has been following, obviously, the campaign the way it has been. And he just, I was, when I saw that, I was afraid that we were going to lose it again. He was going to pack it up. And, it's been nice the past 2 days. He's been back on his swing again. But if you are looking for some fun and it's free, you can go back and read the whole entire thing. I believe actually all of the Bloom County is online at his website, berkeleybrad.com. But yeah, go to this Bloom County page, Facebook page, and you can go back and read through. It's been amazing.
I was going to jump in and say that when I was up in Connecticut in Mystic, there was a bookstore I went into, and it was a really cool bookstore. I haven't been in one in a while. And they had the collection of his stuff.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Well, that's nice, but they had his Trump collection in its own book.
Right.
And I almost bought it. And the only reason I didn't, because I wanted to buy something in the bookstore, because I'm like, how often you go to a bookstore now, and it's, what, you got to support them. I was like, I'm going to feel really bad if I buy this and then he wins, and it's going to be sitting there staring at me in the face on my phone. But flipping through it, those are some funny strips. I mean, he is a genius. I certainly have not been keeping up with his stuff, and I definitely need to make it a priority. And I bet you anything, it's going to become now more of he's going to refocus on that. And maybe make even some of his best strips yet.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's as a kid, reading these, I almost cut my political teeth with these, because I didn't know who some of these people were that he was talking about, and it made me, research them. Back then it was with encyclopedias and microfiche and things like that. But he writes so intelligently, but he also it's amusing. It's funny that even a 15-year-old can understand it, but as a 40-year-old you can appreciate it that much more.
Yeah, the other cartoonist I think you also have to give a tip of the hat to is everything that Trudeau did with.
Oh, Trudeau, yeah.
There's some savage stuff, Trump stuff in that mix there. But yeah, I do think that Bloom County is one of those strips that it just holds up.
It does.
I got the first 2 volumes of the IDW collections, and though there is some stuff that is steeped in the Reagan era, I mean, there's no question that there's some stuff there that I do think a modern reader might have to go to Wiki to gain a full understanding. But it really holds up. Outland's weird as shit.
Oh yeah,
he did not give a fuck when he started Outland, and then kind of retracted a little bit when Opus started. But don't try Outland first. I would say that. Don't do that. But it's a wealth of gems, and I think the only thing that beats it in terms of an 80s strip is Calvin and Hobbes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's
and
they're so different. There are some similarities in tone. They are still different as chalk and cheese, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, for my pick, I'm going to a book that was written by Bryan K. Vaughan, with almost every page drawn by Tony Harris, apart from some specials. And the politically oriented book that I'm going to recommend is something called Ex Machina, which ran for 50 issues, was part of the Wildstorm imprint from DC Comics. It lasted from 2004 to 2010. And this book was in part a way that Bryan K. Vaughan expressed his disdain for the current political leadership that was active at the time. He says both sides, but I do think it comes down a little bit harder on one side compared to the other. And it deals with a gentleman, Mitchell Hundred, who becomes a superhero. He's a civil engineer, and he becomes a hero after he's exposed to an explosion from an extra-dimensional device that was found at the Brooklyn Bridge. He's permanently scarred. He has these weird markings on the left side of his face. Partly because of that and partly because of some other elements, he decides he is going to become this hero that is known as the Great Machine, which is a reference to some of Thomas Jefferson's writings. He is able to communicate with almost every mechanical device, including weapons. In June of 2001, he unmasks himself and runs for mayor. And just a few months later, he stops United Flight 95 before it crashed into the South Tower. The book is really interesting in that it, like some TV shows, even though these are two very different shows, Arrow and Lost, the story has a narrative that is at current time mixed in with flashbacks, and usually the flashbacks inform some of the actions that are happening. It's a very smart series. There are some twists and turns, particularly in the last issue, which would be number 50 if you were reading the book in collected form. It would be the 10th trade or the 5th hardcover. That you'll see some things that if you read it, there were a couple of series where the last issue knocked me out. One is Shade the Changing Man. Ex Machina is another one. Why The Last Man? A little bit, just mainly because of how much you cried. But there are some genuine shocks in the last issue of Ex Machina and may color your perceptions of some of the events as they unfolded throughout the series. And it's also one of these properties that would make a great film or a great TV series. It's been in development hell since 2004. Hopefully that will change now that the rights have reverted back to Vaughn and Moore. That's my pick, Ex Machina. Bryan, I think you've read that, right?
I read, I think, most of it, but I did not finish it. Not because it wasn't good. It kind of got lost in the wave of a bunch of stuff. But anyway, yeah, I need to go back to it.
I just seem to remember we brought that up before. Justin, you haven't, though, right?
No, I haven't, but I've wanted to.
All right. Well, we're going to end this show right now with our regular segment, which is what we call the Woofs of the Week, where we spotlight something, be it a film or a comic book or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may be interested in sampling. We're going to take a little bit of a different turn because this has been a real hit to the psyche, the results of this election for a lot of us, that we decided that we're not necessarily going to spotlight something that's current, but something that is very dear to us, something that puts us in our happy place, because you needed to get to your happy place at various points during this last week. We'll just do this in the fashion that the show progressed. Bryan, you were the first to speak, so Bryan wants to start with you. What is your Wolf of the Week?
So I got to spend my last Saturday and Sunday in Charlotte, North Carolina with fellow Comic Bear host Steve Morey and his partner Jason, husband Jason. Oh man, sorry. I'm always bad about that. And my friend Eric, and we had a fantastic time. We went and saw Doctor Strange, and we were there in part because of curling, a sport that I'm sure I have mentioned at least once or twice on the show before, that I am a active participant in and part of the Orlando Curling Club. And I got to not only have a great weekend with Steve and Jason and Eric, but also a great time of curling. And I got to meet someone who is a fellow podcaster. His name is Dean Gimmel, and friend of the show, Rob Steger, actually knows Dean and curls with Dean up in Jersey. And I got to listen to Dean's stand-up, who I had never heard him do a stand-up, but I had heard his podcast where he interviews. It's a curling podcast. I think it's called The Curling Show, and it was a very informative podcast for me, learning about curling and learning about the curling world. And Dean himself is a phenomenal curler, has been a national champion before, and is a very fierce advocate for the sport. So I was just thrilled to hear his stand-up that made fun of Trump and made some really great sort of pro-LGBT jokes about intolerance and how you deal with things, and like just get to see a whole new side of Dean and meet him in person. That I'm so grateful I went to that tournament for many reasons, but that's certainly one of the big ones. And yeah, curling is like one of those communities that I'm glad I'm a part of, and I continue to draw strength from in these kind of fractious and scary times. And I think, the comic book community has the potential to be one of those communities to draw strength from. I know that is a hard thing to say in certain respects because of some of the negativity we have and some of the internet related people, so I can't just come out and say that the comic book community is one of those necessarily, but certainly our little community here at Comic Book Bears and our sort of extended families and my community with Flame On and all that, and that, it just, those things are also nice totems for me right now and sort of strength. But anyway, definitely, if you have a chance, go check out Dean Gemmel and his curling podcast, and that's what was making me happy.
Okay, let's move over to Justin. Justin, what is your feel-good woof of the week?
My feel-good woof of the week is it is a comic book, and it is an older comic book that they are relaunching next year. I went back and revisited the original Generation X, and oh my gosh, I forgot how much just absolute fun that book was with the characters Husk and M and Sink and Skin and Jubilee, and it was just an amazing book back then that I have not revisited it in years, and I've just been really enjoying reading through it. The art is still just as fantastic as what I remembered it back then. It is so different then, and you see his work today at Bocciolo, and I've just really that has just been a very happy spot for me the past couple of days, just rereading some of these old characters and just seeing just how much fun and remembering how good those books were back 20 years ago. So my woof of the week is the original Generation X.
Great. Well, for my woof of the week, for my feel-good little woof there, I headed over to my favorite actor of all time, and that's Cary Grant. I decided at some point yesterday I stayed home. I think there probably were a lot of people the day of the election stayed home. I ended up putting on North by Northwest, which is a film from the late 50s that was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. And if you want to find a movie that has humor and sex and everything that makes film special, you go to that. It's a smart film, and it holds up. And plus, having a Blu-ray of it with an unbelievably pristine print, it was just a special experience and something that I needed right then and there to just shut off from the world. So that was my feel-good woof, North by Northwest, as directed by Alfred Hitchcock, starring Cary Grant. As I said earlier, we recorded this episode during the week where the results from the United States election came in. Unfortunately, on the date that we were recording this, there was another sad event that happened, and we did lose Leonard Cohen today, who was this amazing Canadian singer-songwriter and poet. Been sick for some time, and 3 weeks ago, actually, he put out an album. What was that called? God, it's some Dark Ideas? Oh, I should have been prepped for this. Lordy, you want it darker. And news of his death I don't think was a shock, but it's still a surprise. And probably his most famous track, as popularized by artists like Jeff Buckley and Rufus Wainwright and Katie Lang, and every year somebody on friggin' American Idol did it, was Hallelujah. And I think that's a very fitting way to go out on this particular episode if we do exit in prayer, in a sense. The version I'm going to be playing is the version by John Cale from the Velvet Underground. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can subscribe to us through iTunes, and if you want to reach out to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Justin Allen.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
We'll be back again real soon. Take care, everyone.
Heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the Hallelujah, hallelujah. Faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof. Her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to a kitchen chair. She broke your throne. She cut your hair. And from your lips she drew the hallelujah. 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 Baby, I've been here before. I know this room, I've walked this floor. I used to live alone before I knew you. I've seen your flag on the marble